Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. My name is Preethy Padmanabhan. I'm the founder and co-host for 10x Growth Strategies community. And it's our pleasure to welcome all of you here today for our SF Climate Week event. So we have a packed agenda here today for you. We're very fortunate to have Nixon Peabody. Shout out to all the Nixon Peabody staff here. Let's give them a big round of applause. And then shout out to all the volunteers. If you want to wave, everybody who volunteered, yeah, thank you so much. Little bit about the 10x Growth Strategies community. I started the 10x Growth podcast during COVID in 2020. And about 2 years ago, once we were coming out of COVID, there was such a huge need for people to get back together. That's why we started this community. It's a founder-focused community where we want to match founders with the right capital, talent, partnerships, opportunities. And you can feel free to follow and then also, connect with us on LinkedIn and also check out all the podcast. So we're really actually happy that all of you are here. You're now part of the community. We typically have about 100, 200 people in our monthly events. So if you follow the Luma, you also get notifications for the events. We come to this venue every 6 months. We also post these episodes on YouTube a month or two out. A little bit, we are looking for sponsors, a little bit of a plug here. If any of you want to be part of this community, it's really worth it. We have these founder VC dinners, we do monthly events, we publish you on podcasts, newsletters, and also make curated intros. So if you want, please talk to me and my co-host Deep, DJ Deep. Yeah, you can talk to us, and then Michael over there. So one of us can talk to you more about it. Now I would love to welcome Rajesh Swaminathan, partner at Khosla Ventures, on stage. Rajesh? Let's give a big round of applause. All right. So, we're going to start the investor conversation here today with a broad topic. As you know, today's session was AI, energy, climate, a broad spectrum. And it was a pleasure to meet Rajesh and talk about all these topics. He has a wealth of wisdom. And what I would encourage all of you is to think about what question do you have for him, right? So that you can actually then learn more in this session. So let's get started. Rajesh, would you like to introduce yourself for the audience here?
Happy to. Been investing in deep tech, climate tech for about 18 years now. Been driving many of our climate investments at Khosla Ventures for the last 6 years. Before that, I was heading Applied Ventures, the venture arm of AMAT, and we were investing heavily in solar, battery, everything related to climate. And semiconductors and photonics as well, which seems to be coming back these days.
Well, I know this is off the script, but what got you interested in becoming an investor?
Anything off the script, controversial stuff is okay. Just to keep it more interesting. Like background was kind of chemical material science, Bell Labs, business school. This is 2006, 2008. The clean tech 1.0 boom was just starting. So my goal was to figure out, how to work and bring all the knowledge, learnings I've had into many of these industries. Worked with a couple of startups during my internship, during my second year business school, and a bunch of other things. Learned a lot. A lot of good people taught me a lot of good things, so I ended up being invested over time.
Excellent, excellent. And now at this juncture, as we're moving from 1.0 to 2.0, with a whole spectrum of AI plus energy plus climate, in the last 12 to 18 months, what has fundamentally changed?
Some of this is pretty obvious to most of you. It used to be climate and energy. Now it's more like AI and energy. But AI and energy combination is certainly helping the whole climate tech solutions much faster than it was doing before. So happy to see the tailwinds, and we need to ride on those tailwinds. If you look at many of the sectors, they've been kind of repurposed to say addressing the data center, AI needs, and many of which is true. Happy to go through examples and how they are really making an impact and big difference for the AI wave. Even things like cement and steel, like data center companies are looking to decarbonize the data centers that they're building, which is a great thing, which is creating a tailwind for many of these climate companies to provide the solution at a reasonable price point that the industry can take, and that helps them scale up as well. So happy to take the tailwind and take geothermal, fusion, cement, steel, batteries, solar. These were all just climate stories. Now it's really AI and data center story. And that's a good thing because AI and data center is real. We can have a separate debate about is AI hyped and all that stuff. We happen to be the first institution investor in OpenAI as well in 2018. It's roughly the same month we decided to invest Commonwealth Fusion Systems, which is a poster child for nuclear fusion. So these things happened at the same time. We didn't see these things coming together this quickly and this well. But it's certainly, the two are intertwined, really well.
Yeah.
We have to use it.
Yeah, we need to unpack a lot from that right now. So you talked about AI and data center. AI demand is driving more data centers, right? And then it's also vice versa. They are intertwined in terms of dependent on each other. What are some new investment opportunities that you see in this whole spectrum? And if there are any examples that you would like to share, that would be wonderful.
Energy will determine which country will win in the AI race. Compute is the second biggest thing. I mean, if you have a race between US and China, it's really energy, the availability of energy at baseload power, that's going to determine who's going to be the winner in a big way. So if you look at it from that perspective, we're not going to build these data center with coal plants. That's just not going to happen, realistically. The gas turbines, there is certainly a limit on how much capacity people are building at this point, how much more you can grow, and that's still not a decarbonized solution, right? So if you really look at it, what's going to pick up the pace, we look at it as geothermal, and super hot rock geothermal is the first one that will pick up the pace in the next couple of years in terms of real gigawatt scale deployments that you can start seeing. And there are companies like Fervo, which are doing geothermal. Some of you may be familiar. They're at 150 to 200 C, but if you can go to 400 C, you get 10x more heat. So we believe in the super hot rock geothermal story because if you get 10x more heat, you go 75% less wells, 75% less water. So the dynamics changes completely, and you suddenly get to less than 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So something like geothermal is going to be the real kind of baseload, 5 cents or kilowatt hour kind of energy that's going to happen. And we're also big believers in nuclear fusion. And that's a big one in terms of companies like CFS, Rialta Fusion, a couple of other companies that are getting there. So they'll get to Q greater than 1 sometime next year. And then that will be the ChatGPT moment for nuclear fusion, right? And then it's an engineering de-risking that they've been well on their path. So early 2030s is when you will see really commercial nuclear fusion reactors happening. So there is a real method to the madness as the energy security happens, energy availability happens, and real clean baseload power happens.
So CFS is no longer a hype. It's the nuclear.
I don't think it's a hype.
Yeah.
So if you look at, it's very easy to put conventional wisdom and say nuclear fusion is 10 years away. It's always been that way. And so you can take that for any technology and be a pessimist on it. Right? That's not how it works. If you look at how CFS actually was working on it, tokamak reactor was known for 30, 40 years, but they put a different paradigm to it. So when we started in 2018, 2019, Bob Mumgad is phenomenal in terms of building that industry. They looked at it as if I increase the overall magnet by double the Tesla from, let's say, 10 Tesla to 20 Tesla, it's order of 4, power 4, which means you can reduce the size by 16, 64, kind of in that order, and that reduces the cost significantly. And they've done immense work kind of de-risking the science, the engineering piece over the last 10 years. And that's what will take them to the moment next year.
Yeah. Wonderful. We talked about AI, we talked about energy, we talked different types, nuclear, geothermal. You also talked about compute. Is there enough compute to meet AI needs? Are there any startups that are innovating in that area?
There's a lot of interesting startups. If you look at it from a compute perspective, all of us know the kind of NVIDIA GPU story. But if you look at the architecture, it's still the same old way of putting a GPU, putting hybrid bandwidth memory, right next to it. It's all limited by how you're connecting the GPU and the CPU and the memory and all this stuff, right? So that's not good enough for what needs to happen to kind of deliver the compute needs. What if you can stack up these GPUs and memory in a completely different way? That has challenges around power dissipation, electrical signals, all of this stuff. But there are some phenomenal, interesting ways startups are working on. We have done some stealth investments. We have other companies in that area. But there's fundamental innovation that are happening there from a compute power perspective, both at the chip stacking level, interconnections on board. Like you're all used to kind of semiconductor wafers. People are looking at panel-based approaches. And photonic interconnects is going through the roof in terms of opportunities there. So Everything we have all worked in the past, like the old good old semiconductors, photonics, is all coming back, and it's good to see all of this coming together. Now the critical thing is, U.S. needs to step up and really build these manufacturing industries here. I'm not proud to say this, but I've been in 4 industries where many of us have worked on innovations. I was in Lucent, Bell Labs, kind of telecom. We used to joke at what is happening in Huawei, they're copying and all that stuff, right? Then I've been in semiconductor industry, invested in solar and batteries. At least 4 different industries where the fundamental innovation happened here in the U.S. But it all transitioned to real manufacturing excellence in China.
Yeah.
Now, AI is finally providing us an opportunity to have the leadership in semiconductors, photonics, in energy. This is not a moment we can afford to lose. That's an existential risk for us in terms of what this country is and what can we develop leadership in. So we can't just rest on everything that LLMs have done and the software investments, the AI first investments that are happening, which is phenomenal. We have some phenomenal investments in that area, but there are fundamental infrastructure around semiconductor, photonics, energy that we all need to do. That's a great opportunity. This is the time, and we can't afford to lose that moment.
Now, you bring up such an important point, right? Sometimes China, as a fast follower, is actually overtaking a lot of this. Can we dig deep into that? Like, what are some reasons why that is happening? Is it policy? Is it, like other reasons why they are actually being able to innovate faster?
There's obvious ones like the capital they throw in, right? So that makes a big difference. But I think the more important thing is they put a policy in place and continue to have a compound growth. Whereas the unfortunate thing in the US is, we like certain technologies, we overinvest, and then an administration or the regulation changes, and then we underinvest in that area. We pick up some other industry, somebody else changes it. So we go through this up and down, and that hurts us in terms of actually building any infrastructure in a really strong way. Hopefully this time it will be different because a lot of things are interesting and coming together, and there is an enormous amount of investments happening, but we need to hold on to it and then build on that success.
Excellent, yeah. So what are some learning lessons from 1.0 to 2.0 that you think we should be taking into, practice?
Yeah, well, lots of learnings. Most investors who invested in 1.0 haven't come back to 2.0 and climate 2. That's bad in one way because most people who have jumped into climate 2, all with a good heart, they haven't had the failures we have seen and learnings we have had, and that brings a certain amount of humility, as well as how do you build the next set of companies. We look at it as, when we invest in a company, we look at it as how do you drive a company to value rather than valuation. Sometimes, at least in climate 2.0, for example, if I look at it, none of our investment memos when we were investing heavily in climate 2.0 captured anything about 45Q, 45X, IRA, green premium, all of that stuff. Not because we thought it'll be a Republican administration versus a Democratic administration. It doesn't matter what the administration is. These things have a tendency to come and go. So our view was the number one thing that we are focused on is Techno-Economics. So we do seed stage investments. Stepping back. So we are an $18 billion fund. We raise a fund every 2.5 years. The last fund we announced was 2 years ago, $3.1 billion fund. Within that, we have a seed fund, we have a main fund, and the later stage fund. Seed fund is $500 million, so we can write kind of $2 to $10 million checks. The main fund is $1.6 billion, so we can write 10 to 30. The later stage is $1 billion, so we can write roughly 75. The reason we created that, even though we started with only one fund in the past, is something like climate, you can't be just passionate. You need to have patient capital. And when we have a seed fund and a main fund, a later stage fund, we are able to take very, very high risk with our seed companies and make that risk and make that investment, put some reserves for those companies. And when they're coming through the next stage, whether the market is down or tourist investors are gone away or any of that stuff, we're able to continue to put capital into these good companies, right? And similarly, keep some reserves in the main fund and go through the later stage fund also. We can also invest kind of at the later stage. So that's how we kind of de-risked, going back to the learnings, like how do you build these companies. Techno-economics, we focus on how do you de-risk a company to these numbers is something we focus on. I think another very, very important thing we have found, and we talk to a lot of the companies that we meet, whether we invest in them or not, is think about how do you integrate into an existing infrastructure. Not every technology may be able to do, but it's very, very important to think about how do you integrate. I'll take a couple of examples, right? We have a cement company. We looked at a lot of cement companies. There are companies that are thinking about completely new feedstock, or an electrochemistry-based approach to building cement companies. But the only company we invested is a company called Fortera. The reason I bring that as an example is they have a super differentiated, innovative technology, like strong IP, everything else. But the beauty is they integrate into any existing cement plant. They take the CO2 coming out of it, add it back to the calcium oxide, make the output as calcium carbonate instead of calcium oxide, which means you are increasing the throughput of any existing cement plant and actually improving the economics of all existing cement plants, while, by the way, not capturing all the CO2 as well. So this is the economics on day one. So I look at many of the climate things as it's not a David versus Goliath, it's a David and Goliath. It doesn't mean you just become a services company to an existing incumbent, but work on a very differentiated technology, but figure out a way to integrate. We've done that for our steel company. We have a company called Lanzatech, which is integrating the existing cement plants. But phenomenal disruption, but figure out a way to build into that infrastructure.
I can completely resonate with that. I think it's almost like we are all in this together, that type of attitude. Right? I know we actually, I got to interact also when I was in one of the climate tech firms, Visually. I felt the same way. The customers actually were working with each other and not competing with each other. All the utilities of the world are trying to make the world a better place. Let us look actually at the next 2-3 years down the line, right? Where do you see as your themes of what you look to prioritize? Because we have a few climate entrepreneurs here who love to hear what they should be thinking about in terms of building.
If I look at I think grid is a ripe for disruption. People have worked on it. Visually has been working on the grid for a while, right? BPP's grid revenues and all that stuff. So the overall grid is ripe for disruption. There are companies emerging for flexible grid management, solid state transformers, like how you do the interconnection. So I think grid is something I would love to focus on. We have investments in that area, how to think about AI for digital grid, digital twins and stuff like that. That's an interesting area. I already mentioned about geothermal. That's super interesting. Critical minerals is another one. I wouldn't just put it in the buckets of rare earths and go after the hype there. That's an important area, but it's a small segment. But how do you identify these minerals, critical minerals, much faster, cheaper, better, versus the mining industry going through kind of a 15, 20-year process to discover these materials and mine these materials? Like copper, there's going to be tremendous amount of growth because of grid and everything else. But can you use AI and sensor fusion to discover, prospect, go into the brownfield, identify these materials much faster? So there is so much overlap and intersection possible with AI and many of the industries that we're working on. So I would bet on geothermal, critical minerals, AI for grid, and even cement and steel. There are some really good companies, but we'd love to explore more. And EV is another huge trend for sure, whether the administrations are supportive or not. It's growing phenomenally well in Asia, in China, in India, and so on. Tremendous opportunities for autonomous vehicles.
Especially with the gas prices and how it's heading right now.
Even robotics, right? Robotics and AI, big for solar installations. Every factory, our view is 80% of every industry will be disrupted by AI, and 80% of every job in every industry will be disrupted by AI, right? It's going to completely replace. So I think Vinod mentioned, like any expert in the room, that expertise will be available for a couple of dollars per hour in like 6-7 hours per year. So all of us are going to be disrupted. We have to figure out how to be part of the disruption and take the AI and be the one that's providing the solution.
Absolutely. Yes, we are now starting to take questions.
This was amazing. You go deep so quickly and across many areas. It's very impressive, but it speaks to your chemical engineering background. So
I learn every day. I get paid to learn.
Well, that's exactly true.
Phenomenal.
Very, very true. So in that vein, I wanted to actually ask you, gave some really good areas. Also, what I'm seeing transatlantically, right? You talked about the grid, geothermal, critical materials, and construction robotics, physical AI. So do you see that this, given that you hinted at the importance of geopolitics, especially in the macroeconomic, against the macroeconomic backdrop, but also in terms of positioning and competitiveness, do you see the current chapter in American technological history as endangering that in some way? Because until now, China has been our adversary. And we've seen, however, steady Euro antagonism. And so sentiment in Europe, especially towards the Far East, is changing. Sentiment within the US and in Canada is also changing. So how do we sort of continue to envision or continue to place US and China as these adversaries when the sentiment among those who are doing the work becomes, if the founders on the ground level doing the work becomes, why is China my adversary? That could be a great partner. That's kind of what, do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like if it's a really geopolitical problem or a geopolitical issue, if Americans and Canadians and Europeans are starting to see China or feel they're more in alignment with China from just execution to large, high level policy vision, how it's actually enacted.
I think that sentiment is unfortunately there. So I was at Davos, that sentiment was certainly there. I look at it as, as venture capitalists, as founders, our North Star is like, how do we disrupt in the next 3, 5, 10 years? And always meet these blips in terms of there's one problem or the other every time, whether it's like complete lack of government support or, not having a friendly government between the countries, or unemployment or inflation or any of the stuff will happen. I look at it as, yes, we all need to figure out how to make that better, but we invest globally. Like we invest in Europe, we invest in great Canadian companies, we invest in India. So as VCs, we have to be focusing on the technology and not get distracted by the near-term stuff that's happening. For founders, don't worry about what you cannot control. Your immediate priority is what milestones can I drive over the next 6, 12, 18 months. It really shouldn't, unfortunately, good or bad, shouldn't matter what the macro is in terms of what is happening there. Something really bad is happening. There is a tailwind that you can use to advance your technology, to get the funding, to bring this technology to market. Use the tailwind, right? That's how we look at it. And many of our technology, if you look at it, for example, yes, some of the European countries may not be wanting to bring the US technology there. And some are looking for, can you have a headquarter there? Can you have an office there to actually build the technology there? There are some opportunities coming up in India where it's scaling up faster than US or Europe would ever, right? So you look at it as, where is my growth opportunity? And focus there. I mean, I'll take hydrogen as an example, right? It's on the south in the US. It's not getting a lot of traction. There was a view that you could get a lot of traction in Europe for hydrogen. No, I'm coming there. You're right.
It's only green hydrogen. I know, I did the partnership. I worked for government.
That's why I said there was a view. But given all the politics, right, people don't want to do it. But guess what? There's a lot of pull happening in India for these green hydrogen. So our company is focusing in India than Europe. So you figure out, you put a method to the madness. Good or bad thing is carbon is a global problem. And if you really have a technology, if you're going to have the highest impact, you will find the right solution somewhere. Have the right team, have the right set of investors around you to help you guide through the journey. And it doesn't work for every technology, every company, but there is a potential solution for, in my optimistic view, at least 80% of that.
I definitely took some mental notes on the Techno-Economics and on the integration that you mentioned. And I was actually wondering, because for some of your portfolio companies in cement, for example, you mentioned they need to find a way to integrate. But that means they also need to work together with very conservative customers, like cement, mining, geothermal, for example. So I was wondering if you could share your take on vertical integration. What if they become the mining company or become the cement company instead, so that they control the speed of scaling? Like, what do you think about that approach, and is that a feasible scaling path for some of the companies in your portfolio?
It depends on the industry. For the cement one, we were able to find the first most forward-looking cement company to integrate and test the first of a kind. Once we were able to do that, there were a lot more people now lining up to do the second of a kind plant, right? For mining, we actually have a company that said, screw the current industry, they'll never move fast enough. So they're an AI-first, fully integrated mining company at this point. It's a company called Mariana Minerals, came out of Tesla and said, we're going to disrupt the mining industry in a big way. And some good mining companies are actually investing in them because they see the vision, they buy into their vision. And there are other mining companies which are AI companies that are actually working with the mining companies and figure out how to partner with them. So there's a method to the madness for each one of these, but we all try to figure out a solution. No one size fits all.
One final question. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for the session. Yeah. So I have a question about because you mentioned so many different industries. Are you also looking at bio-based approaches to these things? For example, compute, for example, storage. I mean, for context, I'm building biocompute where we use PNE for data storage, but Basically, are you thinking about bio-based manufacturing as a way to maybe bring things into the US versus letting it diffuse?
Yeah. Two answers. Yes, we've been investing in bio-based aviation fuels and so on. We have a company called Vanzatech that's doing biomanufacturing, very profitable, have facilities. Their manufacturing facilities are very profitable. On the bio-based compute side of things, we have looked at some interesting ideas. So we can have a conversation on that one. It's certainly very, very interesting.
Look at this. There's that connection here in this event. If some investment goes, that happened at 10x Growth Strategies. Fantastic. Well, I'll ask one final question to you. What is it that differentiates a venture scale startup from a science project?
I would look at it as mainly, regardless of how much risk is there, we like a sense. I think the first thing is it needs to have a highest impact. Otherwise, over time, people lose interest, not able to get enough money. So better have the highest impact. Fusion, highest science risk. If it has a huge impact, if it works, it changes the world in a big way. We look at it as if there is a 90% probability of failure, we'll take the 10% chance of success to change the world in a big way, right? So the impact is the biggest thing that we look for. Everybody is different. I think the second is definitely, for us at least, the techno-economics. Even if the science is the toughest, make sure you have a cost entitlement to beat us, not tomorrow, not day after tomorrow, not like 2 years, but like 3 to 5 years kind of a timeline. You have the ability to write down the cost curve. The fundamentals, science takes you in the direction that puts a different lens on how do you actually build the technology. Like fusion, I gave an example. If you had not done twice the Tesla magnets, this would not have been cost effective. So the first thing we focused on, the biggest science, is can we build a 20 Tesla magnet? That was done in the first couple of years of incubation. That was a big checkbox to say, yes, nuclear fusion will be cost effective. So focus on the highest risk, which has got the highest chance of lowering your cost, instead of trying to do 10 things that actually where you're not able to focus on the cost reduction pathway.
Fantastic. Let's give a big round of applause to Rajesh.